everybody, and welcome to the Huddle. I'm your host, Jody Costa with Barcoding Incorporated. I serve as the Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Partnerships, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today. This is a huddle that's near and dear to my heart, and it's going to cover a lot of ground. So without further ado, I'd like to please invite my panelists to join me. Go ahead and turn your cameras on and hit that mute button. Awesome. Well, welcome esteemed panelists. We're thrilled to have you here today. Barcoding Inc. has been hosting these huddles monthly, and we've been doing these with some of our favorite partners, like BarTender by Seagull Scientific. Thank you so much for being part of this program, and thank you for being here today. I want to go ahead and get started, and I do have one or two panelists that might be new to you and kind of surprise guests. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with a few introductions. As I mentioned, I'm Jody Costa with Barcoding Inc. Barcoding is a supply chain automation and innovation company dedicated to helping organizations be more efficient, accurate, and connected. With that said, I'm going to go around the room and we're going to do some intros, and then we're going to get started. I'm actually going to start with my own teammate, Dan Blank, special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks so much, Jody. Dan Blank, obviously. So I am the director of our label and printing solutions group here at Barcoding, and really got started in data capture about 10 years ago, trying to sell the full solution, right? Everything that touches a barcode, and quickly realized that it really does all start with the label, and that's where I wanted to invest my time. So for the last 5 years or so, that has been my primary role, is working with Barcoding on supporting label and printer applications.
Awesome, welcome. And now I want to move to our partner over at Seagull Scientific, BarTender. I'm going to start with you, Matthew. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Jody, and hi, everyone. I'm Matthew, or Matt Bryan, from BarTender Software, and I run the sales, marketing, and support organizations for the company. So some people call me a chief revenue officer, and on other days, people call me something else. I'll tell you what I like about the industry. Yeah, I'll tell you what I like about the industry. I like the fact that we are helping people in their business every day. For the last 30 years of my life, probably 35, I've been involved in performance improvements in either software, consulting, whether it be in healthcare, whether in document delivery, etc. And business to business performance improvement software, I think, is just a great spot to be in, because you're impacting customers every day. And that's it for me.
Awesome. We are off to a great start. Lee, how about you? Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Lee Stevens. I'm Senior Sales Engineer here in the Americas for Seagull Scientific. I came here into this industry a little bit in a circuitous route. Actually describe myself as a refugee from 30 years of telecom network engineering. And for me, when I came to Seagull and I started working in barcoding and everything, I'd realized this is just another communications channel. And many of the same rules apply. It doesn't matter what your processes are. If the message that is delivered, if the final information is not accurate, if it's not timely, if it is not in a form that people can actually access and use, it's useless. So this to me is just continuing on what I've been doing for a long time. And like Matthew, one of the great things is helping people and helping people solve their problems.
Yes. Well, we're thrilled to have you, and we feel like welcome to the better side. So yes, thank you for being here. And we have one more special guest, and Elizabeth, I know you're not on camera, but could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, and I apologize for appearing like a black box.
It's okay.
I had a technical issue here at home, and I even brushed my teeth for this meeting, so I'm really disappointed you can't see me. But I'm Director of Marketing at Seagull Scientific. I joined the company in the magic world of auto ID 9 years ago. I was hired to develop industry vertical propositions. So, I think one of the things we run into is people think that our technology is old and unsexy, because how long ago was it that Joe Woodland invented the barcode? But the exciting thing about what we do is every day there are new applications and new ways to use this technology that we couldn't have even imagined 10 years ago.
Oh, you are speaking near and dear to my heart on this one. Same with Dan Blank. I see him nodding. So yes, thank you for being here. And I can't wait to dive into these topics with you, because labels and barcodes are anything but unsexy. They are super sexy. They are bringing sexy back. And that's really should have been the title of this whole talk, really. But just so everyone is clear, Seagull Scientific's software, BarTender, is the world's most trusted software for designing, printing, and managing barcodes, labels, RFID tags, documents, and more. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we really wanted to talk on a number of different topics, but we're going to stay fairly close to the supply chain. And I want to start with, some people are saying post-COVID. I'm not quite there yet, but I think we have learned some pandemic taught lessons. And I think that's usually a natural place to start these days, because there has been such a rapid amount of change that people have had to swallow. So I want to start with just kind of an open-ended question around what have you kind of learned here in the very immediate short term of those pandemic lessons? And we'll just kick off the conversation. I'll go from each and every one of you, and we'll use this as a softball to get started. So Elizabeth, I'm actually going to come right back to you and have you kick this off, and then we'll pass the ball around.
Sure. So, just when we thought the end was in sight and supply chains were recovering, now we have this horrible tragedy happening in Ukraine, which has a tremendous impact on global supply chains. I mean, we barely recovered. I think what we'd seen in the lead up to COVID, of course, was slicing that dollar as thin as we possibly could, making sure we had, we were sourcing offshore, we had just-in-time manufacturing. And all of a sudden, when the supply chain gets stopped up and logistics companies and shipping companies aren't able to get personnel to make those things happen, then we end up with global shortages and people not able to get what they need. So the interesting thing for us, what we see is our users and our audience is actually working less to be cost efficient, and realizing that in garnering cost efficiencies, you're trading away agility. So we're seeing, CEOs don't like to move away from cost savings, but it's just one of those things that's happening right now. Agility is going to be key. People expect to go to their grocery stores and find what they want. And, the interesting thing about retail at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was terrified that there wasn't going to be food on the shelves, is there always was food on the shelves. And consumers actually could always find what they want, not necessarily the brand that they wanted, but consumers showed the flexibility that supply chains couldn't at that time.
Yeah, I think probably people jumping at the bit to comment and pick this up. So Matthew, how about you? Want to keep that rolling?
So I think I just to add to what Elizabeth has to say, but I want to come to it from a bit of a different angle. So if you think of what we've learned from the pandemic, from ourselves, many of us have learned that we can work from home. That's in the professions, right? And then what we've also seen is people are still working in the factories, people still working in the warehouses and everything else. And some people don't want to work there. Some people want a bit more safety and other things. So the way that we've been working is fundamentally changing no matter where you are, right? So right at this minute, I'm going to say something that's going to upset a lot of dog lovers, but my wife's dog is right next to me, okay? Okay, now she's away. I say it's the family dog, but I joke internally, right? I'm working from home today. in that warehouse, there's been a lot of change. And one of the big things that's changing, that's impacting us all, is this thing called inflation, is the price increases, which means wages are going up, which means people in the warehouse are going to looking at alternative options and are moving, right? So if you think of supply chain, one of the big issues in the warehouse right now is personnel. So then the question is, how do companies retain people, right? So you can talk about efficiency, effectiveness, but really it's around how do I retain people? And one of them is making their job more enjoyable, making it easier to work in that warehouse, that type of thing. So I think we've seen some big differences there, and we're going to continue to see differences as warehouses update their warehouse management systems, become more efficient, right? They're now looking for other productivity opportunities. And so I think there's a lot of change occurring, and we still don't quite understand the change, and we're going to see it over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, Lee?
Yeah, so what Elizabeth and Matthew said is spot on. Another aspect that I've been seeing is just in time focused on high efficiency, but it made the assumption that the platform that it's based on will never ever break or go badly awry. And now, between COVID and what's going on in Ukraine and other things in the world, we're all starting to realize, oh, that kind of world doesn't really exist. And what we're needing is not just high efficiency, we're needing robustness. And robustness, a scientist told me one time, is the ability to tolerate variance. And that's a lot of what I'm seeing. People are starting to go, okay, I may not get that shipment in time, so I need to have some extra stashed away somewhere here. Or my ship that was destined for Los Angeles may end up going to Portland, or it may get rerouted all the way to New Orleans or to the Eastern Seaboard. Heck, it may end up in another country and get shipped down. How do I handle that? And this is where I'm seeing increased use of more information dense labeling and RFID starting to come in, because people are getting things that they weren't told they were going to be getting. And then they need to sort it all out and be able to gain access to it.
Right, tolerance to change, and going back to Elizabeth, agility, I think go hand in hand. And Dan Blank, I'm sure you're seeing all of these things kind of play out within our customer base. You want to bring it down to us to that labeling perspective?
Absolutely. I loved hearing all three of your comments because they jive with the conversations I'm having every day, right? We have to get away from this concept of all these stock items are always going to be available whenever I need them. And if one supplier's out, I can just call one of my other vendors and pick up these labels. It's definitely not the case anymore. We're constantly talking about making sure that anything that's mission critical to your operation is on the shelf and dedicated, available for you, whether that's at your facility or one of ours. We have several, make and hold type agreements, strategic labeling programs where we can design your label and we'll hold it on the shelf for you. Those have grown in popularity immensely in the last year. Matt's comments about, handling turnover and creating kind of standard orders of practice. We talk a lot about standardization and consolidation on label types and vendor choices. Again, that all kind of comes into the grand scheme of when somebody new walks in, how quickly can they be an efficient employee? And that's a lot of what we're doing here. The last comment about robustness, I think, is really awesome. And I've got a really quick story about that. Working with grocery store delivery, they have a quick practice of, if you try to order a jar of peanut butter and they happen to be out of it, they'll make their best guess of a replacement product for you. And last week we got a tub of yogurt in replacement. I don't like spreading yogurt on my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. My kids definitely weren't excited about it. So, we're seeing that in our industry too. If somebody's out of what seems to be a very common product, you need to have some label specialists in your department that understand the adhesives and the face stocks and the application environment to make an appropriate recommendation. And so we're seeing ourselves doing a lot of substituting materials and products.
Yeah, I mean, well, besides the horror of a yogurt and jelly sandwich, it does go to show you though that all these macro trends and these world global events that we're talking about that affect the supply chain as a whole, I think what people may not, realize right off the bat is that labeling strategy, that tiny little label, is super, super important, right? I think we have a saying that it's not just a label, it's your business. I think just from the start of this conversation, we're seeing how vital it is to, when you are in the space of change like this, when you are implementing maybe new AI or different types of technology, you have to think about that data and how it's being collected and tagged. So any comments on that? I mean, I think the importance of really honing in and reviewing your labeling strategy is vital right now.
Yeah, so let me start. So 8-9 months ago, in between parts of the pandemic, we were actually at a trade show, right? At a large mid-market ERP vendors show for its customers. And they were coming to us saying, we're actually reviewing our labeling because one of the things that we're trying to do is improve the pack-in process when we're receiving goods. And what we need our suppliers to be providing the information in the way that we want it on the packages and everything else, right? And like they were saying, like, how do we get them BarTender? And you don't have to do that. You've got BarTender already. You can allow your suppliers to use the system. But we are seeing people ask themselves, how do we improve what we have, because we need to become more effective? And so we're seeing some of that. Lee, you must have some great stories as well.
Yeah, so one of the things we're seeing are, and it varies by industry, but one of the most common things I'm seeing are people starting to contract with warehouses and turning them into their own mini fulfillment centers, where a warehousing operation is going to host products for a number of different manufacturers that not necessarily destined for the consumer market, but simply for other industries. And these are popping up and popping down as they're responding to their local economics. And so they want to be able to control the labels. They need to be able to know what the information is. They need to have the label triggering being done at the remote site, but they don't want to give that site VPN access or tie them into their overall network. So here we're getting into, how do we get out there to do that kind of remote printing and yet still maintain centralized control so we know what's going on? And then the other side of it, and this is where RFID starts to come in, is all of a sudden this trailer backed up and dropped off 3 pallets of stuff for me without breaking it out. How do I know what's in there? And labels are great, but if it's in the middle box of a stack, how do you scan it? Right. So we're seeing people trying to come up with new ways of doing this. And another innovative thing I'm starting to hear and see about is tying in RFID to immediate location reporting systems. So RFID is actually becoming a part of IoT, the Internet of Things, and being able to develop and manage a meta level of information about your own supply chain and about the supply chain others are using to feed to you. So
yeah, lots of options, right?
A lot of options.
Well, I think, you started to go down a path. I mean, obviously there's a lot to unpack there, but I do want to kind of just summarize to the audience. I mean, there's certain things that I think are right for taking a look at your labeling strategy. A couple of things you talked about is you're maybe starting to think about your warehousing strategy a little bit differently. Potentially you're opening a new facility, potentially you're going omni-channel, potentially you're changing an ERP system. What can maybe Elizabeth maybe comment on some of these other factors that you are seeing out there that would really be the perfect opportunity for a company to start to review their labeling strategy and maybe start to think about some of these newer options?
Absolutely. And just so you know, I'm really excited to talk about RFID a little later too.
We are going to get there.
Okay, so it's interesting. There's a futurist who declared this week that retail is going to brick and mortar retail is going to die within the next 5 to 10 years. And reading the comments on that, first I was struck by how retail outlets are such a social phenomenon, back to the time of the Greek agora, right? It's just where people go to meet. So I don't think we're ever going to replace that. But all the smart people in the labeling world came right back at this guy and said, it's not going to die. You know, you've got, as soon as retail outlets really start shifting the way they think about what they do and become DCs or distribution centers, all of a sudden you have a whole new paradigm in retail stores. And you know, as far as ways to do labeling that people aren't doing, you know, we've got a lot of people get a tool like BarTender, and BarTender is the Swiss Army knife of a product, right? It can do everything for everybody, and it seems pretty intuitive. And you get your team starting to use it, especially in big enterprise deployments. And there's so many different pathways, and oftentimes they choose the wrong pathway. So it's important, and then they end up with a spaghetti pile of data and labeling, and they're, instead of really using the power of this product to streamline their operations, again, they're creating a spaghetti pile. So we encourage people to seek out expertise like the folks at Barcoding to help. We also have a professional services organization. One of the things that we see happening a lot is people don't understand the power of connecting a database to your labeling. And that could be as simple as a spreadsheet or as complex as a global SAP deployment. So instead of having, you know, 5 or 10 label formats to meet their needs and then using the variable data features in the software, they've got tens of thousands of label formats that they're emailing to each other and keeping on a hard drive, or they're on the hard drive of the person who used to work for the company and nobody can find it. So treating labels as a database is really a bad practice. It's so easy to fix. It's amazing. Some of our end users who have actually figured out how to bring in consultants like Barcoding or our pro services for help in this regard, they're astonished at how much better their processes are. Again, managing tens of thousands of label formats versus managing 5. You've got complete audit trail.
I mean, we're not surprised, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely not surprised.
You know who's doing what to a label at every time, and it's a beautiful thing when it happens.
And again, like, I mean, I have to go to you because, you know, process, people, technology is near and dear to our heart, right?
Yeah, process is going to save the world.
No, yes, I'm chomping to chime in there, Elizabeth. You're making some fantastic points. The data is a huge one, right? And you can't really make any new decisions unless you look at that old data. What's great about BarTender that a lot of people don't realize, one of those hidden benefits, is that it starts collecting new data you didn't realize you had before. So you talked about the visibility of all those different templates, what labels were being printed when into what printers are being utilized best. These are all new data points that can help you make new decisions that you wouldn't be able to in the past. Absolutely amazing. I had another point, but you kept talking and I lost it, so I'll come back to it.
Happens to me all the time. Don't you worry. Well, I think, you know, so we've mentioned and we've kind of batted around. I mean, I think that the world, you know, it revolves around data, right? And connecting this data. And I think that's a natural segue into kind of what needs to be collected and what needs to be on a label. And I think this is where Lee started to go in terms of RFID. So there's a world of things happening from a compliance standpoint. And I think that that's a natural change that's going to allow for people to start to think about what data they should be collecting and how they should be collecting it. But Matt, you want to kind of kick us off? Let's start to talk about what we're seeing in the RFID space.
Yeah, and RFID's been around for a long time, and everyone's been talking about it's coming, coming, right? And we're certainly seeing it now. We're seeing organizations, buying groups, looking at how can they leverage the technology for some of the regulatory requirements they have coming down the pipe. But as Lee said, people are getting more interested in understanding very quickly what information is there, etc. We say what's in the package, what are the goods and so forth. I think we're a long way away from receiving a pallet and having every single item on that pallet having an RFID tag, and then trying to read 3,000 pieces of information at one time, right? And when it comes to RFID, I suggest to people, think of it simply, right? Start with perhaps your pallets and so forth, and think of how you're going to manage that data. Because the issue is, once you have an RFID tag, a passive tag, not an active, just start on the passive, and then you start looking for the data and you're activating them, you start to get all this data. So now you've got network requirements, you've got database requirements, you've got all these things that are quite complex. So keep it simple, realize that there's opportunity, and also start thinking about, hey, on the inbound from your suppliers, how can they leverage RFID for you? So when it comes to your receiving area, you're getting information quicker, that type of thing. So that's my piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing those demands coming in, right, Lee? I mean, people are asking it, and before you talk, hit that button.
There we go. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But something that we also want people to understand, and that Matthew put his finger on, is RFID is not a panacea. Even if we had the perfect RFID reading tools and everybody had the chip on every little thing, there are times when it's not going to work. If the tool breaks down, if it's in a place you don't expect, so you don't have a reader available. So this is a principle of communications. You always want to have a redundancy in there. So if the primary isn't working, you've got something else you can go to. And in this case, that go-to is going to be the printed label. It's going to be doing things beyond just code GS1128 coding. It's going to be using data matrix. It's going to be or QR code. It's going to be using digital link. It's going to be the idea of that label is not only reflecting what the RFID is, it's going to be giving you access to other information, not just about the products, but also about the provenance of them. What was the route they came to from here? Who had touching on it? What ship was it on? All of these things now start to become available through some of the more advanced barcode in symbologies. And you tie that and RFID together, you've got a very robust communication system that you can rely on. If the RFID isn't working, somebody can hit it with a phone, and they can get the information they need. If the label isn't visible, then maybe you've got the RFID that you can pull the information from. And that allows you, and then the other part, and Dan kind of hit on it a bit, is the ability to update information. So BarTender, yes, we print, but we can also update. And so if you use BarTender, for example, for labels going out, we can update a database for you saying, hey, it's assigned into this pallet going on this truck with this manifest. That information that now provides provenance about what happened and where. Likewise, when it comes in, BarTender can send out an update through the scanning and saying, oh, here's where it goes, and here's where it came from, and here's who's responsible. So all of this gives you more manageability of your overall product chain, because you have control over the information You're not
Right.
getting stuff blind.
Right. And Dan, maybe you have a good story kind of bringing this to life.
Yeah, so it was actually kind of ties back to what I forgot about before, but the conversation that I had was with a client that wanted me to be aware of what one of their products goes through before they get it out to the customer. Right, so it's manufactured overseas, it lands in a port here in the States, it moves to a processing center to make sure that all the customs are paid before it moves to a distribution center, before it moves to a packaging facility, before it goes to their customer's DC, before it goes to a retail store. There's a lot of moving around the country. That's a lot of fuel costs. And by the way, it needs a new label every time it ships somewhere. So that's one of the problems that we're having in today's industry is just a massive increase in demand. All these consumers are buying more products. These products aren't just going from store to you. They're going all around the country before they get to you. RFID gives you that opportunity to update a tag. So you can potentially put one label on it once and then continue to interact with that ID number and update it and reuse it, which is a very exciting kind of future. I think the comments, I think it was Elizabeth made about, stores shifting into more omni-channel, being able to be more flexible with the labels that are already on their package and not have to dissect everything and repack is huge. But in general, I find myself selling ourselves out of RFID more than into it. As Matt and Lee kind of mentioned, you really have to have a problem that a barcode can't solve. And we do find ourselves pushing people into better barcode systems instead of all the way into RFID. If you don't have a line of sight issue, if you're not trying to scan things that are moving by way too fast, if you're not trying to read an entire pallet at once, those are kind of key items that would say you need to use RFID, but by and large, most don't, unless it's some kind of mandate, in which case the conversation shifts to, now you have to put this on your products. Let's make use of it internally as well.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you might have something to say about that.
Yes, I do. So, in the 9 years I've been in this this wonderful industry, every single year it's been, this is the year of RFID, right? And I kind of thought about 4 or 5 years ago when price points finally came down and read rates became much more robust because they were pretty abysmal for a while, that we'd really see an uptick in adoption. And that really didn't happen as much as many of us expected. There are a few reasons for that. I have to say though, at NRF, I think 5 years ago, Lululemon debuted a fantastic video case study. I think it was done in conjunction with Harvard Business Review. And that really got a lot of buzz around RFID for retail applications and inventory control and things. So we're seeing a little bit more of that. But right now, I see 3 reasons, 3 hurdles that RFID needs to get beyond before it becomes widely adopted. And the first one is, hardware infrastructure. We all have cell phones that can read a QR code or a digital link code, or if you've got an app that can read a GS128 linear code. That's great. Not too many of us have scanners, available. And one of the real pushes right now for using a label for information is reaching the consumer. Consumers we don't have that hardware. I was a few years ago in the UDI effort, I had the opportunity to talk to a collection of OR and hospital nurses. And they said they didn't care for the scanner. They didn't carry it around. They didn't use it. They started adopting this kind of traceability that we're looking at in the healthcare system when all of a sudden the scanner was on the phone in their pocket. And that's when we started seeing traction, right? They also complained a little bit about having too many different codes and not knowing which one to scan, but that's it. That's for another day. So we need to get, RFID is not going to be adopted end-to-end in the supply chain until we have the hardware and the infrastructure to handle it. The second thing that's impacting, actually the next 2 things, the last 2 things, also they speak back to interoperability, right? So the EU their RFID standard operates at a different frequency than the rest of the world. So if we're going to have global supply chains and global trading, that's something that needs to be fixed. Now, to be fair, the EU recognizes that this is an issue. Sometimes they can be obstinate, but they're being flexible. It's taking a lot longer to get everyone on the same standard than we would expect. And then, so interoperability. Right now, we are moving towards almost 1 trillion RFID tags connected to the Internet of Things. And the IoT, I don't know, for a long time, every trade show you went to, it was all about the IoT. People have stopped talking about it so much, which says to me, it's a regular thing and everybody's adopted it. It's part of everyday life. But what you have tags encoded to different standards, and you end up with data collisions. So right now, actually, GS1 has convened 2 groups. They've convened a technical group and more of a touchy-feely industry group. And we're actually part of both of those teams, trying to figure out how we're going to fix this problem of data standards. RAIN is also really busy. They're doing remarkable work here. We're also part of that endeavor as well.
It's awesome. Yeah, I think that if we've learned nothing, we've learned we are kind of a global world. And Dan, actually, when you were talking about these packages going kind of from here to there to there to there, I couldn't help but think about the Johnny Cash cover of "I've Been Everywhere, Man." I wish every label would play that song. I don't know who I need to talk to get that going, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think this is the importance of kind of working with trading partners, working with partners, right, such as Barcoding and BarTender, and working with people who are part of these global initiatives for kind of interoperability. I think if I take this down a level from kind of these macro topics to the label itself, I mean, something that Lee, you talked about was robustness. I also think, and maybe it's just my business, but design. I mean, I'm in the market design realm. I mean, design here has to be vital, right? It's a vital component of what we're talking about.
It really does. I think we've all probably been in that circumstance where we're trying to buy something at the store and the clerk is covering different barcodes, trying to find the right one to scan. And there are some tools out there right now that will do nothing but scan the entire thing and break them all down, and then you can use software to identify the right one. Design of your label is so important because it is your product. I mean, if you think about it, getting a label wrong on something that somebody gets can be at best humorous, at worst life-threatening.
Right.
And so, but labeling, and this was one of the things that kind of puzzled me when I came into the industry and I started to understand the importance of labeling, is it's almost always a last or second to last thought. And when it should be included way up at the front, because all of the pictures and the graphic art might look nice, but bottom line, the customer is looking for that information. One of the things I loved about IKEA before I came to Seagull was the fact that when I was trying to find the product I wanted, they had a picture. And I actually used that picture more than I tried to follow all of the little numbers to figure out, am I looking at the right thing? And that's good product. That's good label design. That's good information system design.
Right.
And that's what it is. It's an information system.
Purposeful design that we always say on my side of the world. Dan, Matt, any stories you'd like to contribute here?
I mean, just that you know, we're talking about labels and design here, and I'm sure most people are picturing a black and white, you know, just printed shipping label or something like that. But we have clients using BarTender for so much more than that. I mean, even the actual packaging label itself, so you really talk about, you know, the visual representation of your product and the value that that brings. There's no reason that you can't, and I definitely have a lot of customers that do use BarTender for full color label design and integration of a barcode or RFID into that label as well. So it really does become a big part of it. And then, you know, you talk about kind of the mission critical applications. I actually spent a year of my label life working specifically in back-end healthcare and transfusion medicine. And we don't call it mission critical labeling, we call it life critical labeling, because if you put the wrong barcode on a blood bag and then put that in somebody's body, you're going to kill somebody. And the companies that I worked at that are printing these life critical labels using BarTender, even on their $1 million printing presses, to ensure that these are all done correctly. And that story usually speaks volumes to the trust that can be instilled here.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, you're back.
Yeah, I want to say two things, right? The first is a big frustration of mine when I'm at the supermarket, and that is that someone has created a little barcode that goes on a piece of fruit, and they haven't realized when they've been testing it that that piece of fruit is round, and those machines don't read those barcodes all that well. And I'm not a happy chappy when I'm standing in line or trying to do it myself, and then you've got to do the manual thing, right? So it comes down to design, right? People just need to think of not only does it design and work, how's it going to be used? And then the second thing is, you know, we're talking a lot about labels here, right? But BarTender is more than that. We got a great customer that does not just labels with BarTender, but uses it for its shipping documents, right? And one of the things that they do is they not only give you the part number, the description, but they put a picture of what you're meant to be receiving as well, right? And so you get a list of 5 or 6 things in that packing slip, and there's 5 or 6 pictures of what's meant to have been shipped, right? So it's, as Lee says, it's images and everything else, far more than just black and white. And BarTender is far more than it's a label. It's an RFID. You know, it can do work with RFID. It can work with shipping documents. There's lots of things it can be used for.
If I could piggyback on what Matthew was saying there, one of my first creative projects with BarTender and working for Seagull was a major equipment manufacturer that sold to a major retail operation. They came to us and they said, we want a variable length adhesive label that will list all of the items, basically the packing slip for a pallet, and we want the pictures next to them, and the label's going to change length because we never know how much, but we want to be able to shrink wrap that, slap it on, and so when they get the pallet, they're not just looking at numbers, they can see the actual images. And that was a fun project to work on, and we got it turned around. And yeah, with BarTender and Seagull drivers, by the way, we were able to do that where they were able to print any length of label, and it was wide enough that the image files for every product was there on the label, and they just started wrapping their shrink wrapped pallets with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and if I can chime in, piggybacking on what Matthew said about printing documents and images and labels and RFID, having all that information on labels is really great. Having that information in a document is great. If you're creating these labels, documents, these files from different data sources, you really run the risk of error and inaccuracies. And so by using, making all those things with BarTender, you're able to create, I think we call them templates in the software, where you're able to tie all these different kinds of documents to the one data source. So if you've got unit level, case level, pallet level, and documentation in there with images, you can guarantee that it's all going to be consistent throughout. And speaking of design, one thing people feel like RFID is very mysterious, and you must need something very powerful to encode those this technology forward chip. But the fact of the matter is, in BarTender, creating an RFID tag is almost the identical process to creating a barcode. It's just as easy. So when you're designing a label, we sort of take that mystery out of the process so you don't have to sweat it.
So clearly, we go back to what we've established, right? So barcoding and BarTender combined a pretty powerful, and barcoding, I mean, our company, pretty powerful combination because BarTender does allow for this ease of use. I think it becomes, incumbent upon everyone to start with that process, right? And the people, because as you've seen, and remember, as we've talked about, once we get to the technology piece, a lot of these things are available today. A lot of these things are already in use, and it really is more a matter of how do we put these things in use, more so than the fact that that this technology doesn't yet exist, right? It's there. It's, BarTender is a very powerful piece of software. It's really on how you use it. I know this because I have software platforms that I only kind of scratch the surface in, and I'm always looking to do better. So we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to go back all the way to the top and say, really, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say a label, to use Dan's terms, is a life critical component to your supply chain. I'd love to just hear you guys affirm that for me, and kind of maybe a story, or just kind of something that you've learned along the way. So it's kind of an on the spot question, but how about we start with Lee?
So to me, the label is your product, because the product is coming in a package 8% of the time. It's a brown box. What is it? Oh, it's the label. If it's inaccurate, as I said, it's at best, you're going to have a laugh. Most likely, you're going to be disappointed. Sometimes people can die. And so and that's what I tell people. That label is your product to the people.
Right. Get that, if you can get that in your head, then you'll start to address these things quicker and earlier in your strategic thinking.
You have to treat the label as part of your product, because it is the first thing people see when they get something.
Awesome. How about you, Matthew? Let's talk about life critical labels to a supply chain.
Yeah, so when I think of life critical, right, Dan had the excellent example, and I can talk about examples of people, in healthcare with people putting the patient pictures onto the wristbands, etc. But I want to talk about labeling errors, right? You might not think it's critical, but labeling errors are huge, and it's life critical for a company. And we're working with one customer now. The majority of their returns are labeling errors, not the product, right? Labeling errors, right? And so I think people out there, when they're thinking of projects, or they've started a project, or they've had BarTender as part of a project, bring back in your labeling professionals like Anne and other people, bring them in, sit them down, start talking about the pains that you have, the projects you undertake, what else you would like to do, because you may actually find you have the technology already in your warehouse at your disposal, and now it's time to extend, right? Think of all the people who have BarTender who don't know that their suppliers could also be using it to put the correct labels onto the shipments, etc. Think about all the manufacturing companies who have to send labels to their customers in a particular way, who do not understand. And one of their biggest pain points is they're emailing backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Is this how you want the label? Is this how you want the label? And out of frustration, the customer says yes, when they actually wanted something slightly moved over. So now you've got a labeling problem, right? And they don't understand that BarTender's got this document management function, this workflow function, business process function called librarian. So invite Dan, invite others, get them on the telephone, or call Lee up and other people in our team. And we're here to help you use what you have to help you become more efficient, more effective. And ultimately, when people say, why do I want to be more efficient, want to be more effective? You sell more, you reduce costs, you can do more things, and it's a lovely opportunity.
Right, and people, happier people who don't have to email back and forth. One of my least favorite things in the world.
I think, what did someone say earlier? Bring sexy back. Bring happy, you know?
There's no segue there. Elizabeth, how about you? What kind of takeaway do you want to leave around this concept of maybe life critical labels for the supply chain?
So combining Matthew's points about accuracy and Lee's points about life critical and Dan's points about life critical. The world's largest industry is the food production and processing industry because everybody's got to eat. FDA recalls, I mean, we're all familiar with E. coli in lettuce, right? And we assume that that's why FDA recalls food products. But the truth is the majority, by a slim amount, isn't about adulteration or pathogens in food products. It's about labeling errors. Either items are mislabeled or allergens aren't identified. So, so what does this mean to the consumer? Well, if you have a child who has a peanut allergy, this could be a life and death issue. So I think the more you can do to shore up a system, and do we ever say we guarantee accuracy? No, as a marketer, I know that I don't want to get in trouble and say that, but you certainly can improve accuracy. And I mean, ultimately, how I feel about what I do every day is that what we do really impacts human safety around the world. And so I think that, look at accuracy, look at safety, look at how life impacting these processes and labeling actually is.
I just love that. What a great job, BarTender team, kind of all working together on this. I know when I started in this industry, I was kind of struck by, I just didn't realize all these people and all these companies working behind the scenes to kind of get us the things that we take for granted every day. So yes, thank you for all of those great answers. Dan Blank, I'm going to turn to you for a slightly different question. And if now we, in our hearts, we love labels just as much as every single one of you. Can you walk through maybe the process that a company like Barcoding would do if I say, all right, I get this, I buy into this, I need to start to look more closely at my labeling strategy. What kinds of things would we do to kind of get that process going?
Awesome. I'm going to answer the last question because the end of my answer is the answer to your question. So
okay, cool. Even better.
So you guys mentioned life critical labeling. We established that the label is really the face of your product and that BarTender can help you eliminate errors, not just for, paying points, but for actual cost dollars. There's a lot of companies that do chargebacks and you have to pay fees if you don't have good labels. In today's environment, those things are important, but also just because of availability. Getting your hands on the physical labels is a challenge today. We typically recommend quality products to avoid more errors. And the less labels you have to print, the more labels you have for actual product. So the last thing you want is products sitting there with no labels because your last batch was all printed incorrectly. So when we work with our clients, we really do focus on that end user experience. We typically start with a needs analysis and we walk through and look at the physical processes that they have in place today, any potential for improvement on those. We tend to sit down and actually analyze that data and then talk to the people that are going to be using the printers and the software and actually putting labels on boxes and make sure they're okay with kind of the thoughts and getting their feedback. Then we'll define a strategy, recommend a solution, and obviously execute a plan at the end of the day with the end goal in mind, being a robust solution that is stable and, can grow with your organization too. That's one of my favorite things about BarTender is you can always upgrade as your business grows. So if you're a really small operation today with one little printer, no problem. BarTender can be very affordable. And then as you turn into a multinational organization, we can set you up with networked licenses and hundreds of printers. No problem.
It's a great partnership. I really appreciate you guys all being here. And as you might have heard from Dan's answer, I mean, you have to approach labeling just like you would any other project, right? I mean, this isn't a wait to the last minute. It's not a tack on. It really is critical to think of this as one of your major initiatives. And this is digital transformation. So I know it's a buzzword, but the labels are part of that. So I have been trying to concoct in my head like a final last question. Since you all did such a great job with the key takeaways, I'm not sure if I want to go in that direction, but I think I'm going to go somewhere totally different and somewhere more fun. And that is and I know that labels come in all shapes and sizes, right? And today is a special day. So I want to ask you all, if you could make a label into the shape of any animal, what type of animal label would you make? And to give you a little time to think, I'll kick it off because I would make a panda bear label because today is National Panda Bear Day. And that's going to get it going. But, what kind of animal label would you make and why? Dan Blank.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. I've got a 4-year-old daughter at home and everything is unicorns.
Yes.
So a rainbow colored unicorn label. She would just be through the moon, and she already thinks labels are cool, which she's probably a 4-year-old that does. But I think that would put me over the top. So
I like it. Elizabeth.
Well, I'm going to say no to panda bears because that's just black and white, and labeling is so much more than black and white anymore. My favorite animal in the world isn't around anymore, sadly. It's the Pachycephalosaurus. That is the hard-headed dinosaur.
Nice.
They were very colorful, and they used their hard cranium to plow through whatever they needed to get to. And that's what I would like to have a label shaped like. Yep.
I love it. All right, Lee.
All right. I'm going to geek out a little bit. Early before we started recording, I confessed I'm a Dungeons and Dragons player. So it's got to be a dragon. It's got to be a golden dragon with the wings out in full flight and all of the myriad colors associated with it.
I love it. And finally, Matthew, your animal label.
Yeah, so firstly, I want to thank you very much for doing a great job, Jody.
Are you buying time, Matthew?
No. I want to be an elephant label. And the reason is I've got a lot to say.
You remember it all, right? So good stuff. Well, again, thank you so much to our partners, Seagull Scientific. The software is BarTender. Everyone loves their BarTender, right? And so easy way to remember that. But thank you so much for being here, Lee, Elizabeth, Matthew. Really appreciate it. Dan Blank, thank you for being a special guest with me from Barcoding Inc. We are here to help, so please reach out. There's some information in the chat, so you can reach out and contact us. You can also schedule a consultation on barcoding.com. We're happy to get started with you. Finally, if you love this video and you want to see more like it, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel. So hit that button when you see it and be part of our community. Again, thank you all so very much. I really, truly appreciate it. It's not just a label, it is your business, and we cannot wait to work with you. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Hi, did you enjoy the huddle? I sure hope so. We were really excited to have you as part of our conversation and would love to continue it. If you have a question or a challenge that you're facing and Barcoding can help you out, please reach out. You can contact us on barcoding.com anytime or any of our social media channels. Again, we are here to help and would love to chat with you. Final ideas. Did you like the huddle so much you wanted to join? Do you want to come on air with me? Do you know someone who would be a great fit or a topic that you'd like to see covered? If so, reach out to me via email or LinkedIn, and I am happy to check in with you and talk through what we might be able to accomplish together. I would love to hear your ideas. We're always looking for new topics. So if you have an idea for Huddle or you'd like to be on a Huddle, contact me and we will make it happen. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.